I'm a nurse practitioner, and in 2008, I started seeing our local kids come into the emergency room, and no one was recognizing them as victims of trafficking or exploitation. And in the United States at the time, we weren't talking about American children being bought and sold for sex. These kids were often looked at as truants, delinquents, runaways, substance users. Kids as young as 11 years old were being arrested for prostitution. And I was absolutely horrified. There's less than 50 treatment beds in the whole United States for American children who've been sex trafficked. 50. And at the time, there was over 100,000 American children being bought and sold every day. I mean, I knew nothing about starting a nonprofit. I knew nothing about fundraising. I knew nothing about developing a campus. I knew nothing, but I was like, oh, I'm doing this. I think one of my superpowers is connecting people and understanding the power of relationship and, most importantly, authenticity. All I cared about was just wanting to help these kids, and making sure that everyone knew about this issue was just such a focus for me. And I had conversations that, 10 years went by before I saw the fruit. Right? Or I even saw like a tree start to grow around those conversations. And so I really believe that obedience and that faithfulness in those small meetings at the beginning is what led to the opportunity and to see this kid step into a place of thriving. And that all the meetings and all the speaking and all the conversations, the thousands of tours that I gave was all worth it for that one child, saying, this is the first time I felt safe in my life. That will never leave me.
Welcome back to Beyond the Keynote. Today I am so excited to be speaking to Jessica Muñoz, philanthropist, motivational speaker and entrepreneur. Welcome to the show, Jessica. It is so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Now, before I continue, I should have asked you this before we started the podcast, but I didn't. So let's just ask on it. How do you pronounce your surname? Because that may not be how you pronounce it, how I just did.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. It's Jessica Muñoz. Yeah.
Muñoz.
Muñoz, yeah.
Muñoz. Beautiful. That sounds much better than the way I said it.
Oh, you said it just
all right. Jessica, let's dive into who you are, what you're all about. I know you've done some incredible things in the world, and I can't wait for us to share that with the audience that's listening today. So anyone that I speak to who has done incredible things in their life has obviously had a whole life journey that's added up to that. I know that we look at people sometimes and we just think, wow, how can they have done this? How come they're so amazing? Why can't I have done that? And sometimes we think that they're just magical, or they came onto the earth and everything came easy for them. And in my experience, that is not the case in most cases. So I'd love to hear all about you and your life growing up and everything that's led you to being able to do what you do today. So tell us about when you were a little girl. Where did you grow up? And do you remember when adults used to say to you, Jessica, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you remember what your answer used to be?
Yeah, so I am really blessed. I was born and raised in California, Northern California, and in a small mountain town in Lake Tahoe area. And wonderful family, loving parents, raised really protected, and I'm really thankful for that. From the time I was a kid, I was always driven towards medicine. And so I knew I was going to go into either being a doctor or being a nurse, and I ended up being a nurse practitioner. I have always had a passion for helping those that are vulnerable, those that need someone to stand up for them. And so I would say I believe I have a justice gene on my DNA, and it's driven me to make right what's been wrong. And as that thread has played out through my life, I can see that that's true. And so it really, I'm absolutely so grateful for the way I was raised, the way I was brought up. And my mom in particular was and still is, a very caring person who always had us involved in community give back, right? And so as much as we got to do all the amazing sports, and I was a ballet dancer, and we got to do all sorts of wonderful things and have great experiences. She did teach us about service and giving back. And so I believe that really took root for me in my life and has really paved the way forward as I've walked through the journey that's been my last 42 years.
Yes, amazing. And I can't wait to dive into, we'll definitely have to dive into that service element and what your mum had you out doing. You mentioned ballet, which is interesting. So you were obviously on stage from an early age. I was
Yes.
similar. I was in calisthenics. My mum enlisted me in that, even though I was very, very shy and would never have wanted to be center of attention. But through that, I ended up falling in love with acting and did a lot of theatre growing up, and that's led me to do what I do today. So, interested to know, would you say, did you ever imagine as a child that you'd be speaking on the world stage and doing
No.
presentations and keynotes in front of really large audiences? Did you enjoy ballet? Did you like being on
I
stage?
did. I
Or,
did. I
yeah?
love to dance, and I had no
Okay.
problem dancing in front of people. But I remember when I started doing the work that I do now and,
Mhm.
raising funds and helping nonprofits and, trying to inspire people to give to something that's much bigger than themselves. I was so deathly
Mm.
afraid of public speaking. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? I got to go talk to all these people. It was fine one
Yes.
on one, but like getting up and then like feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to have all these notes. So I look back and now I'm like, wow, I've grown. But definitely, I mean, I was
Yes.
comfortable being in front of people. I didn't love being in the spotlight, and I still don't.
Mm. Mhm.
But I believe when you have a powerful message to share, it gives you courage and bravery that you never thought was possible.
And when you were growing up, do you remember? Obviously, you mentioned in your non-for-profit when you had to start speaking. Do you remember having to speak in front of groups of people in school or university or anything like that?
I did. So, prior to my work that I do now in working with exploited kids, I, went to college and did a lot of presentations, but it definitely felt very small scale. And yes, I believe
Mm.
those were the stepping stones. Um, but putting together what you were going to talk about and present on. And I remember in some of those presentations, some of it is this is what I have to do because this is the assignment versus
Yes.
doing it from a perspective of like, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I want to talk about.
Mm. Yeah.
But learning to put that structure together and again, having an opportunity, I think, to engage with people and hopefully inspire them towards something, no matter what it
Yes.
was that I was presenting on. But it was the pivotal moment for me was really so in 2008, which was when I started my nonprofit, which I'll share more about later. But in 2012, I was asked to try out for a TED Talk, a TEDx talk.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
at the time, I had no idea what TEDx was or what a TED Talk was.
Yes.
And I remember I had worked all night at the hospital and I showed up to do this tryout. And it was in Honolulu, and they wanted you to share about creating community around an issue. And ended up just sharing my story. It was very raw, it was very, no sleep, and just me never
Uh-huh.
having done anything like that. And so I ended up getting selected to do a TEDx talk.
Amazing.
And
Mm.
so I got to go through the Dale Carnegie School of Public Speaking, which was like a
Mhm.
10-week course. And I remember that was very pivotal for me in building my confidence. And so I ended up doing a TEDx event and
Mhm.
spoke in front of about 2,500 people sharing my story.
Wow. And you hadn't done a lot of public speaking prior to that? No.
No, not
That's a
other than like
that's a
PowerPoint presentations and, talking
That's
about
a pretty
nursing
big event
diagnoses. Yeah.
to jump into. Well done. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And I love, I've read Dale Carnegie's books, and I actually use one of his quotes, or used to use it when I was doing a lot of corporate public speaking training with my clients,
Mm,
because he says great speakers are not born, they're trained. And I
yeah,
absolutely love
I would
that
agree with
quote.
that.
And couldn't agree more with it. Wow, what an amazing journey. And so, seeing we're there, tell us about the TEDx stage and how that felt to have to speak in front of 2,500 people and stay in a round red dot while you're doing it.
That little X on the stage. One, I felt trapped because I definitely, being a dancer and moving, I really like to
Yes.
walk and talk and
Hmm.
use my hands a lot. But no,
Yes.
the experience it was surreal. I mean, at the time, I really hadn't done something like that, as you said. And the Hawaii
Mm,
Theater is an iconic place here on Oahu. And
okay.
so, it's generations old. So there's just been amazing performers that have performed there. And so just feeling so
Mm,
honored to be able to stand on that stage. Um, but I think what was so important with that experience is it gave me a confidence that I didn't have before. And I think
mhm.
it really launched me into my journey of public speaking, which from that point on turned into speaking for thousands and thousands of people,
Yeah.
predominantly sharing a lot of my personal journey to where we are today. And then I think the other important piece of that too was it was the first time I really came out speaking about the work that I do now, um,
Mm,
in a forum where it was telling a story
mhm.
and not so much like all the details around this sex trafficking and exploitation of children. While that was fused into it, there was important components in it, just really around how I believe I have a justice gene on my DNA that
Mm,
drives me to make right what's been wrong, and how I believe there are certain people who are wired that way. You look at Corrie Ten Boom and Abraham Lincoln, William Wilberforce, and others who, at all cost, gave
mm.
everything to help the most vulnerable. And
Yes.
so for me, that was, how do you create community and bring community around an issue of the most vulnerable youth on the planet?
How beautiful. I think that you need to tell our listeners all about what you do and your non for profit and your story so that some of what you've just said starts making sense.
Sure, I
um,
would love to.
I'll let you tell the full story.
Okay, awesome. So, and I'm a nurse practitioner, and in 2008, I started seeing our local kids come into the emergency room, and no one was recognizing them as victims of trafficking or exploitation. And in the United States at the time, we weren't talking about American children being bought and sold for sex. These kids were often looked at as truants, delinquents, runaways, substance users. Kids as young as 11 years old were being arrested for prostitution. And I was absolutely horrified at what I was seeing, but I started asking a lot of questions of these kids when they were coming into the ER. And they were questions that I don't think anyone had been asking them. And so, what appeared to be this delinquent behavior was actually just symptoms of underlying severe trauma and exploitation. And so, I thought, okay, well, I need to do something. I gotta. Why is it that all of us as in healthcare don't really know how to recognize this, identify it, who to call, how to respond? And so I started by publishing some articles for the American College of Emergency Physicians on how to recognize and identify, because the conversation had been about international victims, right? And in Hawaii, people would assume, oh, from Korea and Thailand and the Philippines. And I'm like, no, like American children from like down the street. um, and so, yeah, and I mean, this was before the whole thing with Epstein came out. I mean, this is before trafficking of children in the US in particular was really at the forefront of conversation, right? It had been a third world problem where it's actually a first world problem. And so I then started cold calling anyone who would listen to me, like judges, legislatures, city council. And I ended up meeting with the chief judge for the state of Hawaii. And I said, look, I really believe there's this population of children. We need to do something. They're victimized. They're not the criminal here. And so it became really clear that not only did we need to raise awareness, because there's a lot of things that need awareness towards them. But as a clinician, I thought, okay, there's less than 50 treatment beds in the whole United States for American children who've been sex trafficked. 50. And at the time, there was over 100,000 American children being bought and sold every day. Now it's over 300
American children.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. Every year.
You don't hear about this, do you?
No.
It happens behind
you don't. Closed doors. Yeah. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, if we're arresting kids, there's nowhere for them to go. We need a treatment program. We need a clinically based treatment program that could help them heal. And so I was like, I can do that. I'm a clinician. I'm a nurse practitioner. I can go out and start a treatment center. I mean, I knew nothing about starting a nonprofit. I knew nothing about fundraising. I knew nothing about developing a campus. I knew nothing. I'd only been in Hawaii at that point, like a few years. So I didn't really know anyone. I'm not from here. Yes. But I was like,
well, you said you could do it. I love that. And you did, I'm assuming.
I did. So I went out and looked at raw land and ranches, and nothing was working. You know, it was a lot of like, well, we don't want that in our backyard. And then I ended up finding this perfect piece of land that the government was looking for someone to take over a long-term land lease. We were the least likely candidate. We were a bunch of passionate volunteers who'd raised maybe $50,000. But this property had originally been used as a boys' home for juvenile delinquents in the early 1900s. And so I told the state land board, I said, look, this property needs to be brought back to its intended use, which was for high-risk kids. And so they ended up voting in unanimous support for us to have a 30-year lease at $480 a year on a $19 million asset.
Oh, my goodness.
Which was a miracle. The place was totally destroyed. So we had to do a whole big remodel. But what's crazy is through that process, right, of getting the property, continuing to raise awareness, we built community-based programming at the same time. But I used this tangible structure to explain an invisible population of children. Because as you've just said, people don't know about this. They don't think about it. And people would be surprised to find out that these are normal kids that you could see walking down the street. They look like anybody's child. And sadly, a lot of families exploit their kids for drug money, rent money, gambling debt. And so just to assume, oh, they get kidnapped, that actually is not really what happens. It's most often through a boyfriend relationship where they get recruited at school. And in a moment of low self-esteem, not having strong connection, identity challenges, they can end up in these situations. And it's virtually impossible for them to get out without an adult to help them. And not only get them out of it, but then there's such intense healing, right, that's needed. So,
of course.
So I was having to explain all of these things and this continuum of care that was needed while trying to renovate this huge facility and, create awareness for the cause. I was flying to Washington, D.C., trying to bring all of this to the forefront. And, this was at a time when people didn't want to talk about this. I mean, now it's a little easier to talk about because it's a little bit more socialized. But at the time, it was like, whoa, don't talk about this, right? Because it's dark and that's so rare. And I'm like, no, it's actually very common, much more common than you think. And so ended up building this organization from nothing, from presenting to people in their backyards, going to small churches, to a over 25 million raised in 15 years and a $9 million a year budget. And now we have a comprehensive treatment center that brings healing to body, mind, spirit, and emotion for teen girls that are sent to us from across the United States. And we have a leading clinical program that people from around the world have contacted me wanting to get a program like this going in their respective locations. So it's crazy.
It's incredible. It's crazy, incredible, and so wonderful what you've done. And for those that didn't just hear that because Jessica kind of just said it, among many other things, she raised $25 million. Is that correct?
Yes, I
$25
have.
million. And am I right in saying that a lot of how you did that was through speaking?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Any opportunity that I had to share, whether it was Rotaries, whether it was Seroptimist groups, whether it was big churches, whether it was in Washington, D.C., private fundraising dinners, galas, you name it. I've had the opportunity to speak and share and try to inspire people to get involved and be a part of something bigger than themselves.
Amazing. So tell us a bit more about that because obviously we'll have lots of people listening who are speakers themselves. We have lots of people listening who want to be speakers. And I think it's really important to understand the impact that you can cause on the world through speaking because it sounds glamorous. Speaking sounds glamorous, and there are some glamorous elements to it. Normally, what seems glamorous to start with certainly loses its shine fairly quickly in terms of having to travel all over the world and not be home often if you're speaking often around the world, especially if you live in Australia like I do, because we're very far away from everybody. Um, but I think something that we don't talk about often is the impact that you can have when speaking because you're communicating a really important message to thousands of people at once, many times, or hundreds of people at once. And so it saves time and you're able to impact so many more people at the one time than you can if you're having to have individual conversations over and over again. And of course, I'm sure you also had those sorts of conversations in terms of communicating the incredible cause that you created from scratch. And I mean, how brave of you to be a nurse practitioner in a hospital to then go and create what you just described to us. Tell us about the speaking journey and how did you get in front of the right people to start with, and then how did that grow, and how did you continue to get invited to the right rooms where you could raise money that's ended up in raising 25 million?
Well, it definitely didn't start out with all those invitations. I will tell you, I think one of my superpowers is connecting people and connecting the dots between things and understanding the power of relationship and, most importantly, authenticity. Um, because I was coming from a place of all I cared about was just wanting to help these kids and wanting to make sure that every single person I ever talked to, whether I was sitting next to them on the plane, whether it was on a train, whether it was on a bus, whether it was at work, whether it was my patients at the hospital, making sure that everyone knew about this issue was just such a focus for me. And so, because I was willing to plant so many seeds, and I had conversations that 10 years went by before I saw the fruit, right? Or I even saw like a tree start to grow around those conversations. And so I really believe that that obedience and that faithfulness in those small meetings at the beginning is what led to the opportunity. And sometimes it's showing up, right? And showing up when you don't want to. I can't tell you how many times. And it's a huge sacrifice, right? Because you're like, oh, I don't know if I really want to go to that event, or I'm not sure I just feel like going to that women's tea and this brunch. But at the same time, when you show up, there's always these miraculous, I believe, divine connections that happen. And it's usually in the most unpredictable moment. And so I think when you open yourself up to being vulnerable and being willing to step into that, even when you don't feel like it, because it's a ton of work. Managing relationships, having the stage speaking, it all comes because you clearly know how to manage your relationships in your life, right? Because it's that authenticity, I think, is what is so important. I think we can all think of people or people we've seen on TV where you're like, wow, that person might have a loud voice, but do they really believe what they're sharing? right? And is it self-serving, or is this about really wanting people to understand, be better, to grow, to be open-minded to something new? And so, and that's not a judgment statement at all. It's more of just, I think it's all in how you approach it. And so for me, I've just always looked at, if I have an opportunity to meet someone or to share this story or the courageous story of these girls that I get to serve every day, I consider it such an honor. And the pressure I feel on myself is really more every time I've taken the stage and had the opportunity to share. And I've shared in crazy places like multi-million dollar rooms to, small little community church. And I approach it the same no matter what, because I consider it such an honor to be the voice for this population and really appreciate people's time and energy to listen and want to make sure that they wouldn't walk away from a conversation with me, even if it's from the stage, that they don't feel inspired and that they can be a part of the solution of whatever it is. It doesn't have to be this issue, but I think our human nature as a whole, people have this desire for connection and they have this desire to be better. And I think there's a God-shaped hole in all of us. And I think that the more we can create opportunity where we recognize and identify the humanness in each person and find a way to connect and draw those parallels, whether it's in personal life experience, business, philanthropy, but it wouldn't be possible. I couldn't have done what I've done if it wasn't all the amazing people that were willing to grab onto the connection and then take that connection to someone else. It truly is. It really is. It's about another person and them being willing to share and pass on to someone else. I mean, that is literally how I've done this work, is one conversation at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think you're right. It doesn't matter what you're speaking on, it's always about the connection. It's about the connection between you, the speaker, and every single individual in the room, no matter how big or small that room is. Do you, as a speaker, do you have a preference to, would you prefer to speak in a smaller room or a larger room, or do you enjoy both spaces?
I honestly enjoy both spaces so much. And I enjoy variety. It pushes me to think about how I want to form the narrative and the story so that it's applicable. Um, I sometimes I enjoy the smaller settings a little better because I feel like it's more intimate and you're able to connect, with eye contact, or sometimes from a big stage when there's all these lights, like you can't see anybody. And
Yes.
so, and for me, that connection is so important because I'm speaking from my heart. I'm wearing it on my sleeve. I have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
You get the raw me. And
Mm.
so that connection piece is, when it's a smaller group, I do value. But I also believe, and especially with where I'm at now in my journey, that scaling and replicating and the sustainability, the more people that I can be in front of, I know is better. I mean, at
Mm.
this point, not to discount small groups at all, but
Mm.
sometimes when you're limited on time, you're like, oh, I need to get this out to more people.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that what you said, the message about it doesn't matter what room you're in, every room is just as important as the next. I think that's really important to remember as a speaker in general, because you actually never know who is in the room, and something that might feel smaller or more low level or whatever it is for you that makes it potentially a little bit less significant than something else might surprise you. So always be on your A game, because there might just be that one person in that room who changes everything for you, or changes everything for the organization that you're speaking on behalf of, or the cause, or the impact that you want to make. Um, and you said, you've spoken in multi-million dollar rooms and smaller rooms. Has there ever been a moment where you've been speaking in a room that you wouldn't consider to be a room where you'd think you could raise a lot of money for what you were doing that surprised you, where someone was in there and connected you to someone, or them themselves were able to donate in a way you never expected?
Yes, absolutely. I think of a couple scenarios in particular where, again, it was kind of a smaller setting, a little bit more casual, but had no idea that this connection was going to lead to almost $1 million that was going to
Yeah,
come
wow.
into the organization. And there was another conversation where literally over lunch
Okay.
turned into a couple $1 million donation. And so,
Amazing.
I could have, if I didn't show up prepared or didn't show up ready or engaged or was like, oh, this is not going to go anywhere, right? It's all
Mm,
about that mindset. And I've had to
mm.
coach myself on this. I'll be getting out of my car to go into the venue, and I'm like, I don't want to be doing this. I'd rather be out surfing and I'd rather
Yeah.
be out doing these other things, having fun. And then I just have to remind myself, yeah, but you were called to do this. And,
Mm,
what an honor it is that you get to sit with this person and share your journey and share the plight of these
yes.
kids. Right. And what's really exciting, actually, this just happened about a month ago. There were some kids that I had done some education for probably 12, 13, 14 years ago, and I've been
Mm,
working with survivors since a long time. And so I get to watch them grow and transition
mm.
into being adults and being moms and business owners and all those fun things. But I had this young lady came up to me and she goes, you probably don't remember, but 10 years ago, you came to my class and there was like a big school assembly and you shared your story and you also talked to us about the risk, right? And how we needed to be sure of who we are and not let anyone else tell us or put a label on us. And so she went on to share how she had actually been approached by a pimp a couple
Ah,
years later, and she remembered what I had shared. And I was like,
mm.
and she goes, there were so many red flags, and I ended up reporting it. And a friend of mine almost got dragged into it as well. And I was like,
Oh my
wow.
goodness.
So it was
That's
just,
so good.
again, this is not a room of high powered, high money, individuals, but oh my gosh, this could have saved this girl's life. And
Yes, well, it sounds like it did, and her friend.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's just awful to think that this even happens in the world. I like to think that it only happens in the movies, but I actually have one of my beautiful, amazing clients has a very, very um, awful story that
Mm.
we haven't launched yet, but she will be sharing in her keynote. And I said the same thing to her, that I can't actually believe that this happened in real life and that
Yeah.
people exist in the world that are that cruel, that could want to do this type of harm to another human
Mhm.
being. Um, and it does happen. And I think it's so amazing and powerful that you do what you do, and that not only helping people that have been victims, but you're helping to prevent things from happening to others before it's happened, which is so, so important. Um, do you have, I'd love to know, at the property that you set up, the facility, uh, what what type of work do you do with youth, and how do you support them at that property?
Yeah, so our treatment program is called Pearl Haven. It's a special treatment facility, pretty high acuity, high intensity. So girls are referred to us between the ages of 11 and 18. They're with us for 9 to 18 months. On site, we're on 13 acres. So they receive schooling. They get all their counseling and mental health care, group activities, STEM programming. We have an animal assisted programming. We do cultural arts and music, culinary skills, agriculture. So, as much things that help them process their trauma through somatic experience and not as much like verbal processing. And so they live on site. We provide everything on site. It's 24/7 care. It's basically like a small behavioral health hospital. And so they're getting unique, very tailored care to exactly what they need, and it's all individualized. So we have kids that come from good families. We have kids that come from broken families who are in foster care. We have kids that have no families. Um, and so, there's a process for admission, right? And so we make sure that they're ready to be in our program. And during that time, they get tons of mentoring. We do a lot of group resiliency work. We really try to figure out what are their goals, what are their dreams, what are their aspirations, how can we create healthy connections to replace the unhealthy connections, how do we set them up for success for college or trade school or starting a business. And then if they do have families, families suffer from a lot of hurt as well. So we do a lot of work with the family in family therapy and really helping both entities, the child and the family, heal. So yeah, it's kind of an all-inclusive, really amazing place that, like I said, every child comes with something unique and different. And while their stories can be similar, their trauma is is theirs, and it has different depths and it has impacted them in different ways. And so we unpack that, and we don't live there, right? We don't live in that moment. We live in, let's talk about moving forward. Where are we going now? Where is the joy? Where is the freedom? Where are we walking? And so it's really a lot of future planning. And, we have some bumpy roads. Some days we have to kind of revisit things. But it's so incredible to see the resiliency in these kids. I mean, if you haven't been through this, none of us can imagine what it's like to be in their shoes. Like I can tell you, I've listened to thousands of stories. I've seen it firsthand. I've worked in an emergency room. Violence and abuse and trauma is real. And unpacking that in a way that's healthy and unpacking that in a way that brings healing and is life-giving and starts removing all the labels that have been put on these kids, I think is the most powerful job we have. And so the more we can show up and be consistent, and what the research has shown with this population is they have to have enough time to heal. So a 30-day program or a 60-day program doesn't work. They need time, right? Their complex trauma needs time. They need health. They need safety to begin to try to go through all the other layers of healing. And so I think that's one of our differentiators is it's not a set amount of time. It's how you work through each level and phase of the program. And for some kids, they might need to do phase 1 for 6 months. Some might get through that a little bit quicker. And so, we really want each child to not feel rushed. And so, again, we try to make it as all-inclusive as possible, and having them re-experience childhood again, because a lot of their childhood was stolen. And then we really work hard to try to find healthy foster families or potential adoptive families, because a lot of these kids just don't have anyone to go back to when they're done with treatment. And so that's a big thing for us. And I'm actually in the middle of developing a really robust alumni program and putting together an app so that, girls can constantly stay connected for years to come. And,
Yes,
because we see, healing is lifelong. And that's what we tell these kids. Like, we give you the tools and we start the process, but it is lifelong.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, how incredible. And I mean, what you've built is so huge and so bespoke, it sounds like, to each individual child as well. You must have had to recruit along the way and bring people in to build out this incredible program and have people working there. Did you end up finding anyone through your speaking? Did you recruit anyone when you were out speaking, trying to raise money, and then you ended up having someone that
Absolutely.
actually joined you? Have you got
Absolutely.
any stories or
That
examples you want to share with us about that?
Yeah, so when I was first starting the organization, and I mean, I didn't know about land use permits, I didn't know about anything like developing land.
Yes.
And I spoke at this women's group that was through a church program. And, there was no money to offer this person to do a job, but I was like, I need someone, right? And so I just shared,
Yes.
hey, we're gonna develop this property, and this is what we're gonna do. And this woman came up and said, I do exactly what you're talking about, and I'm game. Let's go. And
Oh,
she jumped in. There was no paycheck. None of us were getting
yes.
paid, right, to do it. And all I can attest it to is, one, God moving in someone's heart, but two, like me being willing to step out and share and try to inspire people to join this. I mean, we started out 100% volunteer driven and didn't hire our first staff until 2016, which was amazing.
Wow. So how many years was that from?
So that was 8 years from the
8
time I
years
started doing
of
this.
volunteers.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And
And
dedicated. I
yeah.
mean, dedicated volunteers who were working other jobs.
Yes. Oh, it's spine tingling, isn't it, when humans come together for a good cause and what can be created
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And I think something that you said earlier in our conversation is paramount as well, and that is that you're able to speak and have people see the future without it being built yet,
Yeah.
because you really had to paint that picture. You had to get buy-in and help people see what you were building that didn't exist, to get them to want to donate, to get them to want to be involved and share their time and their expertise.
And most people trying to do this would be doing it under the auspices of a larger organization with a well-established board. And I was like, oh no, here we go. We're just going, we're just doing. And I mean, it was incredible faith that people had in us by
Yeah.
investing, especially early on, because there was no guarantee. And yeah, I would inspire them, but there's also the stewardship and responsibility, which I believe that all of the training I had from the time I was a kid, my dad was self-employed and I watched him run a business and do it well and do it with ethics and be a very good businessman and really understand like what it takes to like keep going, just no matter how hard it is, and keep picking yourself back up and keep pressing forward and keep building, right, even despite some of the setbacks. And so there was a lot of pieces to this journey that, I mean, truly are a miracle, because if you just looked at us from the outside looking in, we were the least likely qualified people. I mean, I again was delivering babies and putting in chest tubes. Like, what do I know about doing this, right? And yet, I learned, and I
Yes.
went through the school of hard knocks, and had to learn balance sheets and financial statements, and learned a lot of things that I didn't have any formal training in, but I was really intentional to try to surround myself with people who definitely knew more than I did,
Yes.
and would just be curious and just want to learn. And, I made some bad choices for sure at times,
That's how we
but
all
I was
learn.
26 when I started it. So,
Wow,
yeah.
were you? That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. And I believe there's a new venture that you're starting as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there's, as I've launched the organization, and obviously we're in full swing operations and have huge impact beyond even the shores of Hawaii. One thing I was going to add is in 2017, we got approached by Hawaii 5 the TV show.
TV
And
show,
they ended
yes.
up doing a whole episode on my story and the story of the organization. And
How
it got
wonderful.
9.4 million views the first night. And yeah, season 7, episode 19. It's their most watched episode ever.
Oh my goodness.
And
Season
so,
7,
yes,
episode
episode
19. So
19. Yeah.
we all have to watch it, everyone that's listening.
Yes.
I will
And
have
you can
to
still
watch
find
it.
it on Netflix.
Amazing. And do they talk
They
about
call us
afterwards
out,
that
yes,
it's
and Pearl
yes.
Haven and everything. I mean, it was a
How
miracle.
beautiful.
And the cast did a bunch of public service announcements about us, so it was pretty
so
cool.
good.
Really, really cool. But in having all these opportunities, and also having built something from nothing, I think that whether it's in for-profit or nonprofit space, and whether it is a small startup to a large startup. The painful parts and the amazing parts, I think, are still similar. And so having an opportunity to really share on the larger stage just how my story of being unlikely, I'm an unlikely person to have done something like this, but that everyone faces different things in their life, that either you can step forward and take it on and have the courage and do it, or you can choose not to. But I think we limit ourselves in our beliefs. And like I said, for me, I'm just driven to make sure that the system changes. The system, both in the private sector, in the public sector, philanthropy needs to shift around how we're bringing care to the most vulnerable, like these kids. And so I'm really going to be focusing this next year on this national expansion and really looking at building a larger fund that really seeds funding into these kinds of treatment programs that help kids heal, right? So that we can impact more children, but also help support the programs that do exist that have amazing executive directors, but don't necessarily love to fundraise. And so if we could help them and take that off of their plate, I think we could have more robust programming, not just in the United States, but in places like Australia and in other places that would need these types of programs. And so I want to use my voice to really seed more of those conversations and inspire people to, especially women, to step out and make the bold move and do it. And so, if whatever way I can do that and whatever way I can get my story out, I'm looking at as many opportunities to shine the light, and really push back the darkness around this, but do it in a way that inspires people to really think beyond themselves, because our communities at large need the movers and shakers to move and shake and to really step in and be involved, and not just with verbal accolades, but let's get our hands dirty and let's be a part of the change that's needed if we really want to protect this next generation.
Wow. Well, that sounds like an incredible cause on top of what you're already doing. So let's talk about this new phase for you, and let's just have a little bit of fun and brainstorm an incredible keynote show. For those who've listened to many episodes now, you'll know that at Illuminated Story, we blend traditional keynote speaking with strategically placed elements of theatrical magic to create what I call a keynote show, where we're really elevating the experience for the audience, and making sure everyone wants to book Jessica as their keynote speaker so they can hear your very, very, very important message. So I'd be interested to know, you've done so much speaking and raised $25 million through just sharing your voice. I love that you said, I want to share my voice. I think that's a beautiful way to think about speaking. And it's been large stages and small stages. Have you found that you've had to deliver the message differently? Like if you're on a large stage with a big audience, have you had to deliver the message differently to a small space with a smaller audience?
Definitely. Definitely, I have. I think that, first and foremost, I always look to see what's relatable, right? So I've done a lot of work with law enforcement. So I've had the opportunity to be in front of big law enforcement stages. And, I'm not in law enforcement, right? So I'm very respectful of coming to the stage and sharing, right, the perspective of being victim-centered and trauma-informed, and how can we work together, right? And so the way that I approach talking about entrepreneurship and building this program and systems change is very different, right, than when I'm talking to a room full of multimillionaires, because of what is relatable, right? And so I definitely start the different keynotes with different types of stories based on, again, what I think is relatable, because otherwise it's it's kind of, you could lose them very quickly. And so, yeah, so I really think through, and I'm a person of prayer, so I really pray, like, what am I supposed to say? And I can't tell you how many times I've approached different events and I had a whole outline, and I get up there on that stage and I know exactly what I'm supposed to say, and it's not on that outline.
So it
And
just comes
so,
through
yeah,
you when
yeah,
you're there. Yeah,
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And I mean, I always prepare with my facts and my figures and knowing those
Mm,
things, but how I deliver the message and the story and the sensitivities, right? Especially this issue in particular has a
mm,
lot of sensitivity to it. But I've
yes.
also learned to be very bold and not shy
Mm,
away from the fact that it is sensitive, and
okay.
help people, understand what it is
Mm.
that I'm talking about.
And I think that's actually it's a very challenging issue, I think, especially in this day and age, because there's more awareness now than ever of psychological safety for the audience when sharing certain stories from stage. And it's a hard balance to figure out. You don't want to cheat the audience of the story because they need to understand how tragic it is, and in some level you need to protect them as well because you don't want them to feel like they've been through the trauma themselves when they haven't been through the trauma. So I think that's a very interesting topic to unpack a little bit if you're happy to do that. How do you balance both of those sides with the stories that you
You
might be
know,
telling?
that has been one of the things I have had to learn over the years, where it's this fine balance of pushing people to an emotional response, or they'll completely, or pushing them over, right, where they shut down and they're almost paralyzed in fear, or like, oh my gosh, this is so big, I can't get involved. And so, some of it is, as society has become more comfortable around, not that this issue is ever comfortable, but it's not totally foreign. And now that more survivors have come forward that come from a variety of backgrounds, I think people realize how close to home this can actually be. Um, but what I always do now is, yeah, I'll throw in and sprinkle in some facts and figures. But what I focus on is the resilience and the hope, and the resilience and hope that I have to embrace every day, and the cost of the calling that this is, and how do I find the resilience to keep going? Because it's not just hearing the girls' stories. Yes, that's hard, but it is the day by day journey of continuing to advocate, continuing to raise money, continuing to beat the drum, to this issue, to inspire this global change that has to come to this population and to this space. And so, um, I really have found, though, that focusing on the hope and inspiring what the future can look like, and that it does seem kind of dark with some of these things, but that it doesn't have to end that way. And I like to give examples, right, of the kids that we've worked with and what they've overcome. And that was made possible because they believed. Those that joined with us 17 years ago, those that joined with us a week ago, and made a donation or got up and volunteered, that they are now marking that seed, and they're starting to plant their legacy in doing and being a part of change. And so, yeah, it's really, it's inspiring. You have to inspire people. You have to have reality, but you also, the human nature, human soul can only handle so much. And one of the things that I've found, and this especially was early on, is no matter how many times when I was speaking, I could say children, children, children. And people would come up and say, oh, it's so sad what happens to those women. And I'm like, you mean the children? Because I think psychologically, it's easier to say, oh, well, it's an adult. Oh, there's a choice. And not that that's even the case. But I think our minds, it's hard to comprehend. And so I do find that there was just a lot of conditioning and educating that kind of has had to happen, and it's just a delicate balance of how you tell the story and knowing the time and place. And there was a few times I can remember with really important meetings that turned into like 2.5 hour conversations, And then I wouldn't hear from the person for like 3 months, and realizing it was like overload, right? Information overload. And so I learned how to kind of, okay, let's have a little bit more balance. And even though they wanted to have all this information, I would say, let's save this for the next time.
Okay. Very interesting. I think instead of figuring out the future keynote for your topic, I'm just wondering if, because we've been nearly speaking for an hour, and how time flies when you're so interested in what's being said. So I can't even believe it's nearly been an hour that we've been talking. Is there an inspirational story that you would like to leave us with
Sure,
to close
I would
off?
love to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of our first youth that came to Pearl Haven, she was a kid who on paper wouldn't was destined for youth prison. I mean, she had been in so many situations and not stayed in any one place for more than 2 weeks, and had been in 30 plus placements. And she was a kid that the system basically had given up on. And I remember when we interviewed her, all she said was, and she started crying, she goes, I just need someone to give me a chance. She's 14 years old. So myself and our program director admitted her into the program, and we learned so much from her in walking her healing journey. And she really captured the concept of resilient hope, and wrote several things that now have become plaques and icons on the campus, and really seeded encouragement and inspiration for the rest of the girls that have been at Pearl Haven since and continue to be at Pearl Haven. And so to watch her through 18 months of being with us blossom and figure out who she is and who she was created to be, and realize that she's so much more valuable than the labels that were put on her, than the cost that was put on her body being sold by somebody who's just making profit. And to watch her walk into that new life and a new beginning. There isn't, I don't care how many amazing things that I've seen, this was the most impactful for me. And to see this kid step into a place of thriving, and that all the meetings and all the speaking and all the conversations, the thousands of tours that I gave, the amount of vision casting I did, was all worth it for that one child saying, this is the first time I felt safe in my life. This is the first time I feel like I can grow and I can blossom and I can pave that way to my future. And that will never leave me. That will never leave me. And it does capture like why I do this. And I believe my keynote for the future is really the cost of the calling. I mean, I've gone through a lot physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and just like many people have in their life. And it's really that resiliency is a muscle. And with this kiddo, it was up and down with her through the treatment. It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
I imagine.
But we
Yes.
practiced resiliency, right? And that resiliency becomes a muscle, and that muscle becomes something that when you fall down, you get back up so much quicker. So I want to see thousands of kids experience healing and freedom.
Yeah. Do you know what she's doing today?
She's still figuring out her future, but she's alive. She's doing the work. She's still continuing her healing journey. And she still writes incredible things about the program and wants us to get it out to people that listen to us, listen to me. She always asks me to read things whenever I speak from her voice, because she's like, I can't take that stage, but you can share this, because I want people to know this is real and that healing is hard, but that there is so much hope.
Oh, wow. So incredible and so beautiful. I cannot wait till your new keynote comes to the stage. If someone does want to book you, How would they get in touch with you, Jessica?
So they can go to my website, jessicarmunoz.com. Yeah,
Beautiful.
www.jessicarmunoz.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been such an honor to speak to you and to understand more deeply the huge impact that you have had in Hawaii and will no doubt have around the world as this continues to grow and you continue to share your stories, use your voice for good, and have the impact that you are called to have. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I feel very honored.
All right, here's where you're standing. You can close this episode, think that was fun, and go back to doing things the way you've always done them. Or you can decide you're done being the speaker, the leader that people politely applaud and immediately forget. If you want to create the kind of moments we talked about today, the theatrical, the unforgettable, the profitable, I've put together something that'll change how you think about the stage forever. It's called Beyond the Keynote, Creating Your Illuminated Story. No fluff, no theory, just methodology I use with elite speakers and leaders who are done playing small. Go to illuminatedstory.com/masterclass. And hey, if this episode hit you somewhere, share it, leave a review. It takes 30 seconds and helps more people discover that great speaking isn't magic. It's a game and you can learn to win it. I'm Carmen Sederino. Don't just speak, illuminate. See you next week.